Orchard Park Crew digs up clues to lost 17th century Indian nation by Mike Vogel, Buffalo News staff reporter, on September 13, 1992. On a grassy hillside in Orchard Park, workers are digging back into history, coming up with tiny glass beads made in Venice during the Renaissance. The beads are more than just trinkets or curiosities. They're clues to the history of Western New York nearly 400 years ago. They mark a midden, or garbage dump, left behind by what probably was a band of Erie Indians a generation or so before the Senecas wiped out that nation. The beads came, probably indirectly, from early trading between Native Americans and European explorers and missionaries. The site, archaeologist R. Michael Gramley believes, may date back to the years between 1610 and 1635. I think we're digging in Erie Village, he added. It's not a very big village, really, maybe 250 to 300 people, while a big village would have had as many as 1,500. The Baker Road site, in an area being developed for luxury houses not far from the Orchard Park High School, may have been linked to another nearby village in a typical pattern for native settlements. An archaeological site in a field not much more than a long punt from Ralph Wilson Stadium is a likely candidate. Since May, about 25 volunteers have been carefully excavating and sieving soil from the midden, one of two identified by an exploratory trench dug across a mile and a half of grassland. The exploration also uncovered evidence of a 140-foot diameter area that held at least 5 long-vanished longhouses, buildings 100 feet long that each may have housed 10 families. Half of the remaining midden and the longhouse areas will be excavated next summer. The remaining portion of the dump will be left untouched for future archaeologists and deeded to the town by developer Robert Braun. Braun also is contributing to the work and to a planned published report on the dig. So far, the site has yielded some small but spectacular finds, including a baby spoon made from an ocean shell, costume decorations of bone, trade brass, and Venetian glass, rare red-painted pottery fragments, and 2 of the only 3 known clay pipe bowls carved on 2 sides with mask-like faces. There are also arrowheads and stone tools probably used to prepare hides for what was then a booming industry, the fur trade. We make a few discoveries that are a little bit above the ordinary, not often, but they're there, said Gramley, a nationally known archaeologist who heads the Great Lakes Artifact Repository on Buffalo's waterfront. I love it, added molecular biologist Jack Gallagher, pausing after a painstaking sifting of damp mud. I can't wait to get out from one day to the next. The site, on a bank near the headwaters of Smokes Creek, has been known to collectors since the 1960s, but was officially discovered by a University of Buffalo team checking the route of a planned pipeline in 1980. It remained unexcavated, though, until the pre-development archaeological investigations in 1989 turned up even more indications of a settlement. Gramley, in his dig, is using volunteers with skills that rank them as amateur scientists. The work isn't confined to the site. To avoid muddying Smokes Creek, volunteers have taken thousands of pounds of partially sifted dirt home to wet sieve through window screens in their backyards in an effort to recover the very tiniest fragments. In a throwback to earlier eras of archaeology, the volunteers eventually will get to keep what they find. Developers given any uncovered artifacts to Gramley, who in turn will pass the ownership on to his volunteers once the scientific cataloging, study, and reports are done. Yet another set of artifacts from a designated pit has been offered to the State Museum. The styles of pottery and beads date the site to the early part of the 17th century, a time when French explorers had merely ventured into the area. The red paint and other indications may mean the site was a village of the Erie, a nation that was defeated and dispersed by the Seneca in the early 1650s, disappearing as a group as they were killed or assimilated by the conquerors. Gramley thinks the village, which had no palisades or defenses, may have been occupied a generation or so before the onslaught. Recovered pottery fragments with red ochre coloring still intact are a first in local archaeology. The Smokes Creek site, formerly known as R. Haas II site for a former landowner, also may be the first to completely document the contents of a midden. More than 700 glass, stone, and shell beads have been recovered, along with more than 400 projectile points that could have been used as either arrowheads or gambling chips. Fragments of 80 clay pipes have been found, along with more than 500 pieces of broken pottery and nearly 120 stone scrapers that Gramley suspects marked the processing of beaver hides for the fur trade. The fragments show evidence that whoever lived along the creek bank had trade links not only to the east coast, perhaps as far south as the Chesapeake Bay, but also to Ohio River Valley regions to the southwest and to areas of Canada where glacier-shaped minerals provided material for stone beats. Okay.